So often ideas are very rough, and through feedback and through a diverse team, which is important to have a diverse team, you get feedback and that rough idea becomes a gem.
How does a company break through and gain mastery of innovation? What a critical subject that is. Without further ado, Stephen Gaffney. Let me just discuss how my relationship with him began. I was in an airport traveling, I don't remember where, and I saw this book, Be a Change Champion. I think that's where it was. I think it was in one of those like Hudson News or whatever it is. And Be a Change, Mastering Momentum, 10 Factors for Sustaining the Boom and Avoiding the Bust of Change. Stephen Gaffney. I read the book. I'm like, this guy's one smart guy. I got to get him on the show. So we had him on a couple of times, and each time I get great feedback. So I'm like, we got to get him back on. The 12 Barriers to Innovation. Steve Gaffney, welcome back to Mind Your Business.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to be on the show.
Thank you so much. What an empowering subject, even just talking about it. The 12 Barriers to Innovation. And now I imagine by the end of the show, we'll get a chance to touch on all 12. But I'm privy to the list here. I'm just going to jump in with this one. I mean, they all stand out. They're all fighting for my attention here, but I'm going to jump in with this one. This one, quote, no permission. Innovation is part of the job. Can you break that apart?
So this is a big one, obviously, and it's one of the barriers. But so often when you think about innovation and why things don't happen is because people say, well, if you ask a person, if they leaders out there, if you ask employees, so what about innovating around this? And they'll say, I don't have time. Well, what they're missing is innovation is not something as an extra to do. It's actually take your entire job and put it in an innovative mindset. It should be part of our job every single day. So one of the first barriers about innovation is people don't think they have that permission. And you might be thinking, well, that sounds kind of crazy. But the reality is that people kind of come into their job and they're just not thinking that is really part of the job. It just looks as an extra to do. So reminding people we want to be innovative. The other thing about innovation, many things to discuss, but the other thing about it is when you think about it, people come to a problem and then they get stopped by various things. Instead of saying, well, how could I do this differently? So there's many strategies to do, but the very first thing is let people know innovation is actually the job. We have to put that in an innovative mindset. The other thing I really want to make a point about is when people are think about innovation, they typically think about developing a new product and service. And they're experts on doing that for companies. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is how to be innovative daily in our job. And how about even at home? You know, you have the same problems with your husband or your wife or your kids. Innovation is about doing things differently. In fact, we can even talk about the 3 types of innovation.
Please.
Well, this is what I discovered is people don't really realize what innovation is about. And so innovation is not continuous improvement, first of all. You know, and you think about it, I was doing a session and we're doing kind of a debrief. And somebody said, well, we're innovating. We continuously improve things. But that's not innovation. Innovation is a significant jump forward, or it's a right or left turn. And it's often just happening in an instant. I'll give you an interesting tidbit. Guess when they decided to put wheels on a suitcase, right? Guess when they decided to do that? Guess what year it was?
One would guess if let's say air travel picked up in the 50s, so then one would think that by 55 there were wheels on the suitcase.
So here's what's astonished me: not till 1970.
What?
Which means we figured out to put a man on the moon. We were exploring space, and somebody said, "You know what? What kind of an idea? What if we just put wheels on a suitcase?" So. Again, it's just about how you look at your job. There's so many simple things to do. So what are those 3 types of innovation? One is to respond, right? Responsive innovation. And that's when there's a problem. And you kind of fix it. Another one is proactive, right? There's not a problem, but you're trying to do this. But then there's also accidental innovation. That's where penicillin was discovered. I got a whole bunch of lists. Penicillin, Teflon, microwave, plastic, gunpowder, anesthesia, cornflakes, silly putty.
What about the
popsicle,
Post-it
all
notes?
accidental.
Right, Post-it notes, I heard. Post-it
Exactly,
notes.
that's another one. But I love the suitcase example because
Oh, that's
it's
great.
like, we're going to put a man on the moon. We've done it. You know what? What if we put wheels on a suitcase?
Wait a second. First of all, thank God I did not travel before 1970. Man, no one thought of this. Hello.
Yeah, the rolling suitcase, invented in 1970.
Wow. Again, could you please repeat the 3 steps that you just listed in terms of,
The 3 types of innovation,
Three types
because it
of
is
innovation.
important as people are kind of expanding the way they view it. The first is reactive innovation, and that's where there's a problem. So, for example, a client of mine, they want to, staffing is a big issue right now with getting good employees. Yeah. And so they can do the math on this, and there are always going to be problems. And I said to this one client of mine, I said, why don't you task people and ask this question? What would it take for us to never, ever have a problem related to staffing? So how do we not fix it? But that's obvious. But what if we never had that? And that jump-started innovation to doing a whole bunch of different things rather than, again, continuous improvement. Reactive, problem, we got to figure out a solution. Proactive is we choose to look at an area. It's fine, but we want to really innovate. Perhaps being outsmarting the competition or just improving the organization. There's not a pressing problem, but you want to just proactively do that. And then the third type is accidental. Accidental innovation is where there is innovation in other areas, but we don't see it. And that deals with one of the problems and one of the barriers, which we can go into, called we are special. So often companies and industries say, you don't understand it. You don't know what it's like here. I got all that, but and they're missing innovation that's happening in other areas and other industries, which we can discover. But the idea of accidental innovation, it could be happening within your company. What else are people doing that would apply? So we often look for why something can't apply. I would say why it can apply. And I can give you some examples along those lines too.
Well, actually, does this bring us to, and this is one of the 12 barriers of innovation, past talking. Just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean it can't be done. So perhaps this really feeds right into that, to this
it does.
item.
So what you'll notice when people resist innovating, and again, we're talking about daily innovation, not so much new products and services, but just daily innovation. People will say, well, they'll talk about the past. They might say, for example, we tried that before. Or it's not possible. And if you think about this, whenever a human being says something's not possible, that's impossible. Because when you say, or somebody says it's not possible, all you're really saying is based on the past, I've never seen it be done. That's it. Because how do you know what's not possible? And people will often say, but it's never been done. We tried this, whatever, et cetera. So, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. And this is where a company buys into this way of thinking based on their past, and they have these limitations. And then a competitor outsmarts them. Somebody else comes up because they're all hung up on the past and justifying why something can't be done. So whenever somebody says it's not possible, that's impossible. The truth is, we've never seen it be done, but it doesn't mean it can't be done, which is a very important message to say to other people.
My guest is Stephen Gaffney, communications consultant for many Fortune 500 companies. And last time I slipped, the military, but sorry, I slipped again, sorry. Stephen is a keynote speaker. He's been out on the circuit. He's part of NSA. He's in the, what is it called, the $1 million...
Speaker group, the $1 million speaker group.
$1 million speaker group in NSA. For a number of decades, he's part of that. He's been out on the circuit. And Stephen is a leading expert in creating a high-achieving organization with extreme speed. Now, tonight's show is the 12 barriers to innovation. However, I recall, Steve, I just have to get this one in, where you discuss speed, like how important it is to get from point A to point B, and kind of there's no walls, there's only speed bumps. Perhaps you could just talk. Maybe it's even one of the barriers to innovation.
Well, it's part of this, right? Because if you innovate, it's about moving faster. But I think a really important point is about speed that we don't think about. Speed motivates. Have you ever been part of a team that it takes forever to make decisions, and the leader won't pull and make the decision, or people are just slow on things? You don't sit there and go, "Oh my gosh, I'm so motivated now." It's usually like, forget it. The motivation drops. So speed motivates, and it's also an attractive factor when we're trying to get great employees, because if we're making decisions and we're making things happen, which may mean we may make mistakes, but we're moving out, that's an exciting environment to be part of. The other thing about that speed improves quality. It improves quality. So often when people are thinking about quality, they think we got to slow down. And of course, there are times to slow down. But what's fascinating about this is the faster you move, the better the quality. Because if you get something out there, if you're talking about an idea or a way to look at things internally or some new services externally, you get it out there, you'll get feedback. And then you can make adjustments. Where a lot of other people sit there and have meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, and then eventually they get something out there. Meanwhile, others have moved out. So what I noticed about great leaders is they move fast, and related to that, and this is the big one, they're all impatient. Great leaders are impatient. And people might say, well, isn't patience a virtue? Well, yes, we don't want to be rash, but the idea of we got to move things faster. One more thing I just want to say about speed, because it's so critical. I had a client of mine, and he's very innovative, and he moves very fast. And he was told internally to slow down for his employees. And I said to him, that's horrible advice. You don't want to slow down for your employees. You want to get your employees to speed up, because speed is incredible. And they are outperforming their company, other business areas within the company, and they're outperforming the competition because he moves fast, he's innovative, and as soon as he's getting feedback, he's willing to adjust. So there's a lot around speed, which is why we're saying to create consistently high achieving organizations with extreme speed. It's critical.
Incredible. Moving on to another on the list, another element on the list of 12 barriers to innovation. Benchmark thinking. Who knows what's possible? Can you break that up?
Absolutely. If you think about it, and I wrote an article years ago, what if Martin Luther King had said, look, I'm going to try to be the best preacher out there. Right. He excelled, and many people who have just done incredible things, they don't benchmark against other people. They think what is possible. So look at Tom Brady, Elon Musk, and some people may like some of these folks and not like others, but that's not the point. The point is what's universally accepted is they've all done incredible things. They don't benchmark against other people. I'm not saying benchmark isn't useful at times, but if you're going to benchmark your company against others, all you're going to do is go to the level potentially of other companies. But for example, let's say in your industry, 15% turnover is what's universally accepted. Okay. Well, why can't we get it down to 10% or 5%? And people say, well, it's not possible. Reference the other thing. Why do you say it's not possible? Because we've never seen it be done. Doesn't mean it can't be done. Study other industries that have significantly reduced the turnover, and you'll see there's so many incredible innovative ways to handle it. But my big beef about benchmarking is it just creates mediocrity, or at best, you're comparing yourself against maybe the best, but you're not thinking about how to excel. Remember, innovation is a significant jump forward. It's not creeping to other people's level. So that's why I'm really against benchmarking related to innovation, because nobody ever says, we benchmarked our way to innovation. That was our secret. It never happens. So that's why I'm saying that.
Another item on the list, 12 barriers to innovation. How thinking. Focus on the what before the how. Please explain.
Oh, this happens all the time, right? I'm sure you've experienced this, right? You might say to somebody, well, what if we did this? And people say, but how are we going to get that done? How are we going to do it?
Right.
And they won't commit to the goal until they know how to do that. But that's not really how innovation happens. A very trite but old example, but it's it's always going to be relevant, is when Kennedy said, we're going to put a man on the moon, right? He said it, I think, in 1963, and it was done before the turn of the century, right? 1969, but in July of 1969. But here's the interesting thing. NASA had no idea how to do this. It wasn't like, oh, we've already got the plan in place. He proposed that and things happen. So I think great leaders are great visionary. And what you'll typically run up against is people will want to know how to do something before they commit to doing it. But I actually suggest the opposite. Let's commit to doing it. Let's commit to these outrageous goals. And I mean outrageous in a great way, a vision. And then let's figure out about how to do that. So how thinking prevents innovation, because people always want to know the plan before they're willing to commit, but you got to make the commitment before developing the plan.
Brilliant. I love it. Scope out, have the vision in mind. Don't worry about the details, how you'll get there, because practically anything is possible. Yeah, anything is possible. But that vision has to be out there. Whereas if they say, well, how's this going to get done? What type of screws do we need? What type of computer programs? You're stuck.
Absolutely. I mean, look at like Steve Jobs and some people say, well, I've heard about these examples, but the point is they have a vision. You create that vision and then you say to people, let's talk about this. And why would this be so important? And you get people around and then, all right, now let's figure out about how. We have to figure out about how, but the how comes after the commitment.
Let's move to another item on the list. Failure stopping. When mishaps happen, draw empowering lessons and reward behaviors, not just results.
Absolutely. So what's interesting about this is often people have done things and they've been punished. And this is really important. You might let me give a very basic example. You want to motivate people to have honest communication. Remember, a big message of mine is not what people say, it's what they don't say. And have you ever met somebody who said, you can tell me anything, and then you give them feedback and they flip out? They actually punish, right? So what happens is in organizations, I see this a lot. We need to innovate. We need to move forward. And then somebody takes a risk. They move out and they're punished because it didn't work. That's an important thing to take a look at, because if you don't deal with the failures, which is inevitable on many things, because you kind of fail your way to success. If you don't create the environment to deal with failures and mistakes properly, people will stop innovating. And I've been dropped in organizations where that culture has to get shifted. So a couple things to look out for. If mistakes have happened, you want to draw empowering lessons. So what happens is that people will make mistakes and sometimes they draw the wrong lesson. Well, you can't take risks here, or they don't appreciate that. But what you want to say is, what lessons can we learn from this? As you know, and I've talked about this, where I'm a cancer survivor, and there's often things that happen. You can't often stop what happened. It is what it is, but you got to draw empowering lessons so you're not being the victim of the past. That's important. The other thing is to reward behaviors, not just outcomes. It's easy to reward the successes of innovation. Right. But what if somebody fails at it, but they did the right behavior? You want to make sure that's clear and saying, listen, although it didn't work, I love that you took initiative. And I want to reward. So you want to reward the behaviors, not just the outcomes. And that's critical because often the rewards only go to the outcomes. The other thing that's really important is when you're managing and leading, manage by outcomes and let people do things the way they want to do it, as long as it's legal and ethical, because that creates innovation. But nobody ever says, I had that leader who micromanaged me, and that made me so innovative. I'm incredibly innovative. It never happens. What happens is when you have that micromanagement, you say, forget it. You stop thinking for yourself and you just do what you're told to do. So failure stopping is when there's been a lot of failures and properly addressing that correctly so people feel empowered and move forward.
My guest is Stephen Gaffney, communications consultant for many Fortune 500 companies. Before we go to commercial break, Stephen, how can people get in touch with you?
Thanks for asking. So just be honest. If they go to our website, justbehonest.com, there's a way to contact us. If they mention the show, we'll send them one of the books I've written in the past for free, the electronic version. There's also something else I want to mention.
Sure.
If you go to the bottom of the website, there's an honesty calculator, which actually converts like everyday problems into dollars and cents. And there's a lot of interesting tools on the website. It's all free, so I'm not trying to pitch anything. It's all free, but I want to help out people. So if they go to justbehonest.com.
For those that are watching on YouTube, please reach out. Go to justbehonest.com. Check out the honesty calculator. You do not have to put in your results. We're not looking to embarrass anyone. I'm sure everyone's going to be great here, but just in case, you do not have to share your results. Let's move to another item on the list. Organizational folklore. What does that mean? What's that all about?
Oh, it's a big one. What happens is people will say, and it's a little bit about what we tied before, but this is around where there's company folklore, where people are operating under limitations of what they've heard the company will accept or not accept, or leaders will accept or not accept. And they don't run things to ground. Let me give you an example. I had a client of mine took over an organization that was not doing well. It had about 9,000 people. And so he's a really innovative guy. And so he came out with some ideas and he said, we need to make these changes. And people said, we can't do those. He said, well, why? And they said, well, it can't be done. I mean, it's not possible. And he would just simply say, instead of saying it is possible, move forward, he said, okay, well, just tell me where it says we can't do it. And about half the people never came back because obviously it never said they couldn't. Right. Some people did come back to him and they would point to things. They'd say, like, look here, it says that. And he said, well, let's read it together. And it never said that. And of course he knew this, but what he was trying to show people is run to ground. When people say organizational folklore, you really need to take a look at this. I do a lot of work with the military and the government and do a lot of things that with companies. I've even done and do a lot with companies and their customers and whatever. But it's so interesting that in various departments, it's the department of no. And it's easy to accept that, right? What is a better response is, look, I want to learn. So can you just show me where it says I can't it can't do that? So it's not a combative way. You're not antagonized. You're just saying, hey, listen, let me learn. So if it says in purchasing, we can't do this, can you show me where? Because what you're going to find out is so many people are working under organizational folklore and they haven't really challenged the situation. And I'll give you one other example because it deals with everyday life. I was doing a session actually in Hawaii. It was a really great place. And this guy in the session says, you can't be honest with people. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, people get fired when you're honest. And somebody in the seminar who worked in that same company said, well, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I don't know because I wasn't there when it happened. And so here's a guy who's operating under you can't speak up because you'll get fired. And he wasn't even there, but it didn't end there. Other people challenged him and tried to run to ground where he was coming from and where it might have been traced. Anyway, they traced it back to this guy who actually was fired, but he wasn't fired because he spoke up. He was fired because he wasn't doing a great job. And and we all know as leaders, when you let go of an employee, there's only so many things you can say. But somebody leaving out the door can say all kinds of things, whether it's true or not true. So challenge organizational folklore. Where does it say we can't do this? And most of the time, you're going to find out you can do this, or there's another way to get it done.
Incredible. Let's move to another item. Individual mentality. And this, I actually wanted to get this one at the beginning of the show because team. You gotta have a team to be successful. Innovation is a team sport. Please address
Absolutely.
It.
Yep. Like what I love to say is exactly what you're quoting is that innovation is a team sport, which I think is easy to forget because you tend to see these individuals or the heroes who develop something. But even when they come up with an idea, it takes others to implement that. It takes others to buy in. There's many great ideas that people have come out with, but they're not great at buying in. Creating that buy-in. So I've worked with a lot of organizations that want to move out on an idea, but how do you get the workforce behind you? How do you get the buy-in to move forward? Because an idea is an idea. So, but without a team, it's a team sport that executes. But here's something else interesting. Mm-hmm. It almost never is the idea that people come out with. It's an idea that somebody else contributes to. So often ideas are very rough, and through feedback and through a diverse team, which is important to have a diverse team, you get feedback, and that rough idea becomes a gem. But it comes from creating that diverse team and creating that open, honest communication. And the reason why I came up with this and identified this is because I've worked so much with teams, and I've come to realize that so often innovation isn't happening because people are trying to do that on an individual basis, and they forget about the buy-in, and they don't know how to get that buy-in, which is a lot of the work we end up doing. How do you create that buy-in? Whether it's an organizational transformational change or whatever the case, you got to create that buy-in, and you got to be open to feedback and creating that open, honest communication, all of which we could talk about more, but there's some things that we've already talked about on previous shows that they can look up all around this.
Absolutely. Let's get to another item here, and this is a delicate one, but this also has to do with dealing with a team. You know, people are human, and not everyone is optimistic, unfortunately. Not everyone's optimistic. Pessimistic people. Optimism is a central key to innovation. How do you navigate that?
So we need to talk first about the how pessimistic, what is pessimism and what is optimism? Because pessimistic people will often say, well, I'm just being realistic. But here's the truth. Optimistic and pessimistic people both are realistic. The difference is pessimistic people believe in a negative outcome. Optimistic people believe that there's a way, there's a positive way, there's a positive outcome. So what we find out is that optimism is central to innovation because pessimistic people are just going to tell you why something won't work. And it's valuable to know the realistic what's happening here. But optimistic people are willing to have the difficult conversations. So let me give you an example. A pessimistic leader will walk in a situation and say, wow, this is really messed up. I can't believe this is happening. Blame, and we're going to try to do the best we can, but it is what it is. An optimistic person will say, wow, this is a problem. We have to face it. But somehow we will figure out an answer. Somehow there's a way. And I speak from that by being a cancer survivor, by going through many ups and downs in businesses like we all go through. You have to believe that there's always a way. Whether it was the COVID period or whatever, whenever we're faced with things, innovation happens because it doesn't mean we had the answers. It means that somewhere out there, we are going to figure out an answer, and we are going to become better because of it. Not just slightly better, but significantly better, transformative better.
All right, here's another item on the list, again, from the 12 Barriers to Innovation. My guest is Stephen Gaffney. He's a communications consultant for many Fortune 500 companies. This item, no fun, reduce stress, inject joy. Is it that simple?
It is. I'll give you an example. There's a friend of mine. She runs a retail store. And, and she said to me, people aren't doing the right thing and they don't understand how we have to take care of the customer. And there's all of these little mistakes and they're not putting things away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I said to her, well, it doesn't sound too exciting to work for you.
Ouch.
I don't know. That's not really going to create excitement. And so she realized that her mood, which we've done a lot of work on mood and on other shows, and I'm working on that book about how mood is critical to success. But what's fascinating about it is if as a leader, if we're not having fun, it doesn't create innovation. So if you think about it, Google and all these interesting companies, they create that atmosphere of fun and energy because creativity and joy is significantly important. Our mood is important to creating really innovative ideas. Think about it this way. Have you ever noticed that when you're in a bad mood, things don't tend to work well, right? And you might say, well, that's why I'm in a bad mood. But what we know is, have you ever noticed when you're in a good mood, you're smarter? When you're in a good mood, you're smarter. Right? Think about it this way. If somebody throws you a problem, you're in a bad mood, you're like, here we go again. No good deed goes unpunished. But when you're in a good mood and somebody throws you a problem, you're like, okay, well, it's a problem, but we're going to figure out a way. So we have to make sure as leaders, and here's the thing, we're not going to blame somebody above us. We got to lead our boss, our customers, people that report to us all the way around. We need to inject fun and energy in there. And by injecting excitement, which other people are going to feed off of, that will create innovation, because there's a playfulness about it that we have to look at when it comes to innovation. So injecting fun. The other thing is to look at what's stressing people out. And Dr. Nito Cobain, he's the president of High Point University. He's done a lot of this, and he appointed. When I last, followed him and stuff and talked to him, he created a director of WOW, and the director of WOW was designed to look at what was happening and eliminate as best he could the stresses that were happening with the faculty and the students. So you may not be able to hire a director of WOW, but here's the takeaway point. Are you willing, and are we willing to look at what's stressing people out, which are some of these other barriers we could talk about with pessimistic people and bureaucracy?
Wow, we're running low on time, but we still got around 10 minutes left. Let's get another one before the commercial break. And this is just an important one, bureaucracy. Oh,
absolutely.
How do you
let's
deal
look
with
at bureaucracy
that?
for a moment.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy is a creation bureaucracy is created because of lack of trust. It really is. That's why we create that bureaucracy. It's a lack of trust that somebody else isn't going to do what we need them to do. That may be legitimate, but here's what's so fascinating. When somebody messes up in their job or there's a mistake, the tendency is let's create a process so that never happens again, which often can bog down all the other people that were doing it well. What if we just said, instead of creating a new process, we looked at it and thought, you know what? We had made a bad hire here. They were just the wrong person in the wrong job. Let's get somebody good in there. And so what you notice is that there's organizations that have developed many, many layers, but it's a result of lack of trust that there's problems. So we're trying to eliminate it. I'm not saying all bureaucracy is bad, but as a whole, it's layers upon layers. So what can you do? Because nobody says, wow, I'm in such a bureaucratic organization. It's making me innovative. I do a lot of work with the government, and this is a big problem because we have to look at bureaucracy, but there's things that we can do every single day. So let me give you an example. A client of mine decided to tackle this, and they appointed a tiger team to look at bureaucracy. And what they found out is one of the most annoying things that were happening that had created a lot of bureaucracy was approval layers, for money spent. And they had all these different approval layers. And instead of, and so what they did is they looked at how can we simplify this? And they significantly reduced the approval layers on certain financial things that needed to get done so people could move faster. Again, speed motivates, and all these other things happen as a result of it. So are we willing to look at the bureaucracy and what needs to get eliminated? It's easy to pile on procedures, but what if we take away procedures and make it much more simpler and eliminate or reduce the bureaucracy? You're going to find people are more innovative, because think about it this way. People often want to execute on something, but then they'll think, wow, I've got to get this approval, then this approval, and then the lawyers are going to say this and purchasers say this. And very often they just give up before really getting started. Look at bureaucracy, reduce bureaucracy.
But Stephen, before we go to the break, just a quick note, just so that people don't misunderstand. What's your take in general as far as the value of having process for those for those on a team or a large team in order to make sure that elements are being followed through correctly and don't have to be taught, from ABC to everyone?
I appreciate you bringing this up, because I'm a big process guy and a formula guy. So I do think there's processes and formulas so that are the keys to success. Like we developed these 12 essential elements for a team that convert any team into a high achieving team, a consistently high achieving team. There's many processes and things that I'm a big fan of. But here's the thing, is a process helping or hurting? Is it increasing innovation, increasing productivity, or hurting? Processes are really good because if you follow the simple things, it does create consistency throughout the organization. But that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about the bureaucracy that we all kind of know is bogging us down. That's not helping, and that's what we need to look at. And it may not mean that we eliminate it. It may mean that we reduce it or simplify it. Somebody said this once, and I think it was Albert Einstein. It takes genius to make things simple. It doesn't take genius to make things complex. Have you ever met somebody who has the art of making something complex even more complex? Or have you ever got a process or procedure that you got to follow and you're like, I don't even understand it. So that's what I'm talking about. Right, okay. But it is important to have process and procedures because that has consistency. And the idea about process and procedures are to free us up so we can use our ingenuity to do a great job.
A special shout out to all those following us and watching us on YouTube. Feel free to share your feedback in the comments section below. We'd love to see it. We do monitor it. And especially tonight's show, featuring Stephen Gaffney. And we're talking about the 12 barriers to innovation. He's addressing all the key points that any company has to deal with when they need to bolt forward in innovation. And we covered the 10 in the previous segments in tonight's show. We have 2 left. Let's get to the first one from in this segment. We are special. We share more in common than we do the differences.
So let's talk about this as a mindset. First of all, we do share more in common than we do differences. Whenever there's a problem that we have with people, we focus on the differences. But if ever, I love taking people through this exercise. Choose a difficult person in your life. And what I want you to do is brainstorm the things you share in common. And first it takes, I don't share a lot in common, but when you think about it, we share more in common with other individuals than we do differences. The same holds true for companies and organizations. But unfortunately, there's this mentality that we're special, it's different. And so that's problematic, and it's also an opportunity. The opportunity is to look at other industries. So one of the things I pride myself in is cutting across all different industries, from national security and defense to doing work in the hospitality industry, the insurance industry, even the gold mining industry, and all different industries out there, because I don't want to be industry only specific, because then you can suffer from incestuous thinking. So what I do with a lot of my clients is I bring other ideas and ways of looking at it to a new industry or the industry that I'm working on compared to others. Let me give you a specific example. Marriott's a big client of mine. And I love Marriott. And so they don't believe in calling their employees. They call them associates. Because what they want to do is send the message, we're in partnership together. Mm-hmm. And so why I'm saying this is I've often advised clients, whether you change how you look at employees, you got to think about how you're approaching them. If you're talking to them in a certain way, it could happen. So what if you change things? Or I'll give you another example. The gold mining industry. Can you imagine being in the gold mining industry, which every day you're mostly unsuccessful? Right. Think about it. If every day you're discovering gold, my gosh, it's going to, but so mostly you're unsuccessful. So how do you motivate people and in their job when they're mostly unsuccessful? And the answer is by making sure they enjoy their job day in and day out. Now, that may sound obvious, but think about how many companies, they really don't take care of their employees. They say, we really care about the customer, the employees, but they have them work always many extra hours. And there's always times to do that, but they burn out the employees. They don't care. They're always focused on the customer. But like going back to Marriott, for example, Marriott's foundational principle is if you take care of the employees, they call them associates, they'll take care of the customer. So they're very customer focused, but there's also employee or associate focused. But the gold mining industry offers us another take at making sure as leaders, and we operate, whether it's in our marriage, our relationships at home, it doesn't matter. The idea is, are we enjoying our day, our life on other folks day in and day out, and making sure rather than only making sure we get the joy out of the outcomes. We have to enjoy the day in and day out, which goes back to what we're talking about, innovation, right? Rewarding behaviors, not just the outcomes. So it's the idea of doing that and making sure that happens.
Last but not least, and this one's very apropos because we have only around 2 minutes left. No time. But when motivation is high enough, creative options will be found.
So this goes back to a little bit what we're talking about, and then I want to expand on. Yeah. So if you ask people innovate, they'll go, I don't have time. And so first when I was starting down this path about innovation, and incidentally, the reason why I started down this path of innovation is because when it comes to consistently high achieving organizations and consistently high achieving teams, an important element is the ability to innovate day in and day out. So what I realized when you ask people, well, let's innovate, they're like, well, I don't have time to do that. So it's really not about as a to-do, it's taking your entire job and putting in an innovative mindset. The other thing I realized is when the motivation is high enough, they'll do it. So I give people an exercise, and the long and short of it is an exercise. I say, let's propose that your boss came in and said, I have the ideal project for you. And this is your dream project. But there's positive and downside. The positive, you get the project, but the downside is you're going to need to still do your job day in and day out. It's what you're going to have to do. You can have the project that'll take about half your time, but you need to still do your job. So then I task people, what would you do? Because you want to do this. And people come up with incredibly innovative ways on how to do their job in half the time. And so, of course, the lesson learned is when the motivation is high enough, people figure out a way. But the other thing is I'll say, why aren't you doing those types of things now day in and day out? Right. Because if I were to say, could you, and this goes back to what's possible, could you reduce your job into half the time? Everybody would say, no, I don't, I'm running at full speed. I don't have the time. But see, we just did an exercise that proved you can do your job in half the time. When the motivation is high enough, people will find a way to innovate.
Wow, we are out of time, but before I let you go, Stephen, how could people find out more information and get in touch with you?
So if they go to our website, justbehonest.com, there's a way to contact us. There's a contact page. And we talked about, the various things that are available on the website, like the honesty calculator and the challenge crisis assessment, all are free. And there's a bunch of other articles and things like that. But if they mention in your show, we're going to send them one of the books I've written, one of the things I've written around this subject matter that is there for them for free. But they have to mention your show. So if they go to justbehonest.com, and of course, if they want help in their organization, we'd love to help them out.
Incredible. This wraps up an incredible edition of Mind Your Business. Tune in again next Sunday night for another great edition of Mind Your Business right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. Have a successful week. Thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe to this channel and be notified every single time a new video goes live. Don't miss out on any of the weekly interviews that I have with top business leaders, sometimes Fortune 500 executives. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications.